0.000000075%. These are the exact odds that the OKC Thunder have of being where they're at right now. The Oklahoma City Thunder have found themselves in such a unique and advantageous spot in 2025, and I don't think people realize how unlikely this is to happen in the modern NBA. OKC has one of the brightest young superstars that can potentially be the best player in the league for years to come on end. They have the youngest championship roster in NBA history at an average age of 24.8, where the average age of a championship winning roster is around 27 to 30. But the Thunder weren't just good in 2025, they were among some of the best teams in NBA history in terms of point differential and regular season record, a truly dominant team. To add on to this, the Thunder had the 25th lowest payroll in the entire league, setting themselves up beautifully to pay their stars so they'll have them for years to come on end. But what really puts the cherry on top of the 2025 Oklahoma City Thunder is their draft capital. Yeah, they have a lot of draft picks. 18 picks over the next 4 seasons to be exact. The Thunder are set up perfectly not only to be a juggernaut in today's game, but also to dominate the future. While most teams in the modern NBA sell their souls just for a shot at one championship, if they're lucky, Oklahoma City did something that no one else has done in the modern league. According to some math from ChatGPT, the odds that the Oklahoma City Thunder, or any NBA team for that regard, finds themselves in such an ideal situation as OKC is in right now is about 1 in 33 million. I know, crazy, right? If we were to replay the NBA over a 10-year time horizon, like we're playing 2K My League, do you know how many decade-long attempts it would take to find a team in an equal or better situation as the 2025 OKC Thunder in the modern NBA? About 4,433,333 decade-long simulations, and we would finally find one other NBA team in a similar situation. And here's the crazy part. The Oklahoma City Thunder are doing everything to perfection to build a modern NBA dynasty, and even they still aren't guaranteed a dynasty. The NBA has seen a different champion every single year since 2019, or 7 straight years of parity, and it doesn't look like it's going to stop anytime soon. The Rockets just got KD, the Denver Nuggets, who pushed OKC to 7 games in the playoffs, upgraded their roster significantly. The Lakers got DeAndre Ayton and could make a splash in 2026. The Timberwolves are only getting better. The Cavs and Knicks are both amazing in the East, and teams like the Magic and Pistons are starting to look dangerous. The days of NBA dynasties ruling the league might just be behind us. We're in an era of talent distribution, player empowerment, and salary rules that make keeping a championship juggernaut together nearly impossible. The Oklahoma City Thunder might just be the last hope of the era of dynasties, because if they can't do it, we might find ourselves in a league of parity for an eternity. Building a dynasty is really, did I say really freaking hard in the modern NBA. Talent is more evenly spread across the league than any other prior era of the game. Strict salary cap and luxury tax rules force contending teams that want to keep their expensive rosters together to go through a financial nightmare. Superstar players have more control of their own fate than ever, who will leave your franchise at any moment. There's an increased risk of career-threatening injuries due to the increased agility and athleticism needed in the modern NBA. All of these aspects that have made building a dynasty that goes on countless deep playoff runs, wins multiple championships, and dominates an era is pretty much impossible. There's been 7 unique champions over the last 7 years, and I think there's a pretty good reason for it. In 2019, it was the Toronto Raptors who lifted the Larry O'Brien Trophy, only for Kawhi Leonard to leave immediately after this feat. In 2020, the LA Lakers took over the bubble and won their 17th franchise championship, but AD got injured, they couldn't keep their insane depth in this roster, and LeBron got older. In 2021, the Milwaukee Bucks won their first chip in 50 years, but Giannis and Middleton suffered injuries, and their core got too old to contend. In 2022, the Golden State Warriors, with a very retooled roster, won the championship, but Curry, Thompson, and Green all got older, and internal issues wrecked this team. In 2023, the Denver Nuggets hoisted their first ever championship banner into the rafters, but they couldn't afford to keep the depth that they had in 2023 to compete. Last year, we saw the Boston Celtics win it all, but the following season, Jason Tatum tore his Achilles, and Boston couldn't afford to keep their stacked starting five. And just recently, the OKC Thunder rose their first Larry O'Brien trophy with hopes of not becoming just another one-hit wonder, just like the last 6 champs have been. Can OKC realistically avoid the fate of becoming another singular champion super team, or are they doomed? It seems like building a team that can win multiple championships with the same rosters like a foreign concept in the 2020s. Every other era had that team that defined their generation, but we're still waiting for it in the 2020s. I have a really hot take that might upset my older audience, which is most of my audience. Many, if not all, the dynasties of the previous eras wouldn't work in the 2020s. I don't think the Boston Celtics are winning 11 championships in 13 years in the 2020s. I don't think the Lakers would go to 9 NBA Finals in 12 years and win 5 of them. I don't think the Bulls would win 6 championships in 8 years. Yes, even with Michael Jordan. I think even winning 3 championships in a decade might even be out of the window now. My definition of a dynasty is a team who won 3 or more championships in about a 6-year span while keeping their core roster together. So by this definition, we've only seen 7 dynasties in league history. That being the Bill Russell Boston Celtics, the Showtime Lakers, the Larry Bird Celtics, the Jordan Bulls, the Kobe and Shaq Lakers, the Duncan Spurs, and the Splash Brother Warriors. And today we're gonna nitpick through each historic dynasty of why they simply wouldn't work in the 2020s. Prepare for your favorite legendary super team to get exposed, because they would never survive in 2025. The Boston Celtics, led by Bill Russell, are the only dynasty that's cracked at least 6 rings, because they nearly doubled that with a count of 11 championships from 1957 to 1969. Pretty insane. But this anomaly of a dynasty doesn't happen without a few key moves. In 1956, the Boston Celtics didn't even have a top pick in the draft, but Red Auerbach, the team's head coach and the godfather of the Celtics dynasty, pulled off one of the most lopsided trades in NBA history. He sent Ed Macauley, a 6-time All-Star, and Cliff Hagan, a future star who hadn't even played a single game yet, to the St. Louis Hawks. And in return, the Celtics got the 2nd overall pick. And with it, they drafted Bill Russell, a defensive cheat code, who went on to win the franchise 11 championships in 13 years. But this trade only happens because of one reason. It happened mostly because Macauley wanted to move back home to St. Louis to be with his son. Not because St. Louis actually evaluated Bill Russell's potential, not because they had a plan, but because back then, many NBA front offices were kind of winging it. There were only 8 teams in the league at the time, with no draft combine, no advanced analytics, no salary cap, and no free agency. If you were a player back then, you couldn't leave your team, and you weren't in control of your own future. Players were basically property to GMs. Boston just happened to be the smartest front office in the league at the time. They weren't winning because they outplayed 29 other powerhouses like today. They were winning because they had better scouts, way fewer threats, and a league structure that let them stockpile Hall of Famers without any fear of losing them. Pulling off one of the most lopsided draft night trades in league history, and stacking a team without any fear of countless Hall of Famers leaving. Pulling off one of the most lopsided draft night trades in league history, and stacking a team without any fear of countless Hall of Famers leaving you is not happening today. The Showtime Lakers were one of the most entertaining dynasties the NBA has ever given us. Showtime made 9 NBA Finals appearances in 12 years, and they won 5 championships in 1980, 82, 85, 87, and 88, never having a record below 54 wins, capping off arguably a top 3 dynasty in NBA history. But this electric and fan-favorite super team might not last in the 2020s. In 1979, the Lakers landed the 1st overall draft pick through a coin flip with a pick they had gotten years earlier from the New Orleans Jazz. and this pick turned into the greatest point guard ever of Magic Johnson. The Lakers already fleeced the Milwaukee Bucks out of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and they drafted an All-NBA forward James Worthy in 1982 while they were still championship contenders. The LA Lakers might have just lucked out from their era. Showtime from 1980 to 1988 had 4 All-NBA players with Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, James Worthy, and Jamal Wilkes. On top of this, they had quality depth around these stars like Defensive Player of the Year and 8-time All-Defensive Select Michael Cooper, sharpshooter Byron Scott, and big man Michael Thompson. In 2025, you cannot afford to have multiple superstars and elite depth on the same roster at once. Showtime would easily be in the second apron with no room to improve their roster or keep their own players. The Lakers made 9 NBA Finals in 12 years, mainly due to a weaker Western Conference, beating up on teams like the Larry Nance and Walter Davis Phoenix Suns, the Dale Ellis and Tom Chambers Supersonics, the George Gervin Spurs, and the Houston Rockets with Moses Malone and Hakeem Olajuwon. Weaker teams compared to what the Eastern Conference was. To cap off Showtime, this roster had little to no spacing and would suffer greatly with only one real three-point shooter in 2025. It's literally impossible to keep this mega pool of talent on one single roster for a decade in 2025. The 80s Boston Celtics were arguably the most stacked dynasty of all time. Not only did they win 3 championships and make 5 finals appearances in 6 years, but they're one of the only dynasties in the NBA and ABA merger past 1977 to have 5 Hall of Famers on one roster, 4 of which were in the middle of their primes, while having depth around this core roster. But let's slow down there, Larry Legend. The Celtics in the late 70s pulled off one of the weirdest draft scams ever, drafting Larry Bird a full year before he was even finished with college. Imagine in today's era if the Mavericks drafted Cooper Flagg last year before he was even playing a single game in college, or if the Spurs drafted Wemby in 2022 when he was just barely 18 years old. Adding on to the fleecing of the league Red Auerbach and the Celtics were doing, in 1980, the Boston Celtics traded away one-time All-Star and 4.4 points a game scorer Ricky Brown in exchange for 2 Hall of Fame big men, Robert Parrish and Kevin McHale. Not only was Red Auerbach fleecing the league in the 60s, but he was running back the same shenanigans in the 80s, where he was the GM of the Celtics as well. There is absolutely no way Auerbach and Boston are pulling off either of these 2 front office scams of calling dibs on Larry Bird and fleecing Golden State out of 2 Hall of Fame big men in 2025. If the Larry Bird Celtics played today, I think they'd have another nickname, the Second Apron Celtics. In today's era, there is no way you can keep together a roster of 3-time MVP Larry Bird, All-NBA First-Team Select Kevin McHale, 9-time All-Star Robert Parrish, Finals MVP Dennis Johnson, All-Star guard Danny Ainge, former MVP Bill Walton as your 6th man, and All-Star forward Scott Wedman, all on one team. Boston was lucky free agency didn't exist back then, because Larry Bird and Kevin McHale would get max contracts, and Boston would maybe be able to keep 2 of their 5 depth cornerstones, 3 if they're lucky. But Red Auerbach built a dynasty that he knew was all his. In 2025, you cannot call dibs on a generational talent a year in advance, finesse your way into 2 Hall of Fame big men, and keep a super team for 7 to 8 years without breaking the bank. Six rings, 6 Finals MVPs, 2 three-peats. Michael Jordan is the undisputed GOAT in the eyes of millions. The 90s Bulls cemented themselves as the gold standard of modern NBA dynasties, with title runs so legendary it doesn't even seem real today. But what if I told you the GOAT and his super teams wouldn't survive in today's league? You can give every excuse of Jordan's Bulls not playing against any real competition, a smaller league at the time, the 2 years they took off from 1994 to 95 to save their reputation. But outside of all this, I think there's one undeniable reason that would tear this team apart. The 90s Bulls were some of the most stacked rosters in NBA history. They had the best player in the world for about a decade, an all-NBA level sidekick, and an elite level power forward during each three-peat, along with crucial depth around this core. But the Chicago Bulls completely fleeced their players out of tens and even hundreds of millions of dollars in the 80s and 90s. Michael Jordan, after his already cheap rookie contract, worth less than $3 million in 1988, signed an 8-year contract up until 1996, worth just $25 million. There are 73 players in the NBA right now that make more than $25 million in next season alone. Scottie Pippen with Chicago was getting absolutely robbed until the 1999 season and onwards, where he finally got his bag. Rodman probably got the best deal of the three, making as much as $9 million in his best year with the Bulls. But on the flip side, Rodman's contract looked like Forbes list wealth compared to the peanuts the Bulls were giving to Horace Grant during the first three-peat. The 1996 Bulls, who went 72-10 and are regarded as the best team in NBA history by many. Do you know how much Chicago spent on this team? Only $23.5 million on arguably the greatest team of all time. This is pretty much an owner's wet dream. Heading into the 2025-26 season, the cheapest team in the league is the Brooklyn Nets, who are going to spend about $140.3 million in their roster, more than 5 times of what Chicago spent on their roster in 96. As a matter of fact, the last time we've seen a team spend this little on their roster was with the 2007 Charlotte Bobcats, who spent $20.2 million in their roster. Let's just say they were pretty far from the 96 Bulls. If the Jordan Bulls were in 2025, both MJ and Pippen are getting supermax deals, and after that, no one is guaranteed in the payroll. So potentially no Rodman, no Tony Kukoc, no Ron Harper, no Luke Longley, no Steve Kerr. In 2025, you cannot keep 2 of the best players in the world while also having the best depth in the world. The 2000s Los Angeles Lakers, led by Kobe and Shaq, are one of 4 teams ever to pull off a three-peat of championships, the other being the '60 Celtics and the Jordan Bulls twice. Shaq at his peak was arguably the greatest player to ever lace up on an NBA floor, while having Kobe Bryant, tons of depth, and a great coach by his side. But the Kobe and Shaq Lakers wouldn't survive in the modern era. I don't even think Kobe and Shaq would survive the social media era in the 2020s. Every locker room conversation would be leaked. Every comment about Kobe and Shaq's relationship would be taken out of proportion. Trade rumors would happen daily. Shaq's movie and rap antics and Kobe's legal troubles would both get exponentially more attention. There was no way the Lakers front office is surviving all this for 8 years straight, let alone one three-peat. On top of this, in the early 2000s, the Lakers had several key vets on great contracts, including Horace Grant, Rick Fox, Ron Harper, Brian Shaw, and Robert Horry, all into their 30s playing key roles for LA. Not only would you have to worry about paying Kobe and Shaq max contracts, but all these vets are asking for big contracts in the 2020s, making this cohesion of young star power and veteran depth pretty much impossible. The LA Lakers in 2025 are not surviving the endless drama between Kobe and Shaq and cannot afford to pay all of the expensive vets around Bryant and O'Neal. The San Antonio Spurs, with Tim Duncan and Greg Popovich, quietly go down as one of the most consistent dynasties in league history. San Antonio finished with 5 championships and 6 finals appearances across 3 decades while never missing the playoffs with Duncan on the roster ever. You could not draw up a more reliable dynasty than the Duncan Spurs. But Tim and San Antonio wouldn't survive in the 2020s. San Antonio benefited from a wild circumstance where MVP big man David Robinson suffered a season-ending injury in 1997, effectively tanking the Spurs. San Antonio then won the lottery and drafted eventual Hall of Fame big man Tim Duncan to pair up with the Admiral. It also helps that the Spurs had insanely loyal stars that are like finding a needle in a haystack in today's NBA. Tim Duncan took massive pay cuts near the end of his career just to keep San Antonio competitive. Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker never left to start their own team. Greg Popovich stuck with the Spurs through thick and thin, and David Robinson stuck out the twilight years of his career under the shadow of Tim Duncan and sacrificed his glory for winning basketball. This lack of drama and lack of selfishness is pretty much never happens in today's league. It also helps when you play in a small market that gets limited pressure from the media to win titles every year or break it up like other cities have. You can't rely on tanking for the first pick while praying for the unmatched loyalty from your stars to build a dynasty in 2025. The Golden State Warriors are probably the most offensively talented super teams the game of basketball has ever seen. They completely shattered the three-point record book, started a new offensive revolution in the NBA, and broke the mark for the NBA's regular season record. But there's a few reasons this stacked team wouldn't last today. In 2016, after Golden State blew a 3-1 lead in the finals to Cleveland, they needed to make a move to stay competitive against the Cavs. And what better timing for the NBA's salary cap to explode overnight than in the summer of 2016, giving room for Golden State to sign a top 3 player in the world, making the league completely unfair for the next 2 seasons. This is not happening in 2025 with smoother salary cap increases and this expensive of a roster under second apron rules. You are not signing Steph, KD, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green all to max deals. Along with this insanely lucky cap explosion, Golden State had some very lucky draft picks, like getting Steph Curry as the 7th overall pick, Klay at the 11th pick, and Draymond Green in the 2nd round. Modern NBA analytics would have found the immense utility and effectiveness in Klay and Draymond earlier, and teams would have taken chances on Steph with better modern day sports science and load management. You cannot rely on a cap explosion and landing 3 back-to-back draft sleepers in 2025 to build a dynasty. Now, you're probably wondering, what's the last box with the question mark on it for? I thought we already covered all the dynasties. Well, this 8th box represents the next dynasty of the NBA. If you're asking what it takes to build a dynasty in 2025, it's pretty much night and day from the past. You can't just stack Hall of Famers like the 60s Celtics, pay your stars pennies like the Bulls of the 90s, or luck out on a salary cap explosion like the Warriors did. The NBA is doing everything in their power to kill dynasties, but if any team has a real shot, it's the Oklahoma City Thunder. They've got their anchor in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, an MVP level superstar to build around for a long time. They have their young core of guys like Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren, alongside other key role players who can grow and peak alongside Shai. The one major pitfall that could haunt OKC is money. The Thunder are quickly sailing away from the underpaid juggernaut title with huge contracts to their stars and massive contracts coming for their depth. The only way to maintain their greatness is to pretty much do the entire process all over again. Drafting under the radar talent, developing prospects, and finding cheap talent. The OKC Thunder are far from a finished product with Sam Presti. Finally, Oklahoma City will need a bit of luck, health, and timing to keep their core together, making a dire attempt at avoiding the previous pitfalls of other talented rosters of the 2020s. Oklahoma City already has the blueprint. The only question is, can they actually pull it off? Or is the NBA going to chew them up like every other almost dynasty?